Hello folks, Mundane Man here again, and today I am working on my 2015 Can-Am Outlander L ATV, and I've been very negligent with this sucker. It's been sitting in the garage for about 6 months and I haven't run it or anything in that time period. It's sitting there low on gas, so one of the first things I'm going to do is I'm going to siphon the gas out of it and put some fresh gas in it, check some fluids, and we will go from there. So let's get at it. First off, why don't we do a quick walk around of this Outlander L Can-Am. Again, it's a 2015, and it's been a very reliable unit for me, even though I don't have a lot of miles on it. You can tell by it, it looks pretty clean yet. Bone stock. The tires and rims came with the unit. I did have to buy the front rack for it, and I also had to buy the front bumper. For whatever reason, those that didn't get included. And I had to put on my own winch as well, which is it's a Can-Am winch, but I think it's made by Warren. I'm not 100% sure on it, but it's a 3,000 pound winch, which has definitely gotten me out of a couple situations. So it does work well. I've had to replace the cable on it once already, because basically it was probably me not using it correctly. Like after I had pulled myself out 1 or 2 times, I hadn't re-tensioned and re-spooled the winch properly, and the cable kept binding and jamming, so I had to buy new cable. And then now basically after I've used it, or at the test of the start of the season, I'll spool out the cable and then I'll start winching back the something heavy, basically like my trailer, which is about 200-300 pounds. So I winch it up and just watch to make sure that the cable is spooling correctly back onto the hub of the winch itself. So it's got all the required things it needs now to be on the trails. Lights are key. So it's got low and high beam lights. These are halogen lights, they're not LEDs. And it also has the required tail light, which also acts as a brake light as well. It has the ability to put a hitch on it. It doesn't have a receiver, but you could certainly bolt a receiver on there or have somebody weld one on there if you want. And I think you can pull up to 500 pounds with this thing. So, I mean, it does have a bit of bush wear on it, if you will. Some of that is mainly my straps for the that I used to tie it down into the trailer. And it's the 500 V-twin fuel-injected motor. It has plenty of horsepower for what I use it for. The exact specs on it I can't say off the top of my head, but I want to say 65 or 70 horsepower, which is plenty for what I do. I mean, it'll crawl up a hill. It will, it brakes nicely down the hill with the CVT transmission. My biggest beef with this, though, is the belt noise on it is really loud. It's a very whiny unit. But it is 4-wheel drive. You have the option of setting it in 4-wheel drive or 2-wheel drive. You just have to remember to flick the switch. A lot of them, I think it's the Hondas that have all-wheel drive, so it automatically distributes the power, but this one you got to make sure you actually put it into 4-wheel drive. And the low and high speed transmission with reverse. This is the button for the winch. I also added heated handlebar grips, and also the throttle the thumb grip, or whatever, the throttle's got heat in it as well, which is a really nice option. And it's got the onboard display here. So as you can see, it's out of fuel, but I still got to pump out what's left in there. And right here it tells you it's in 4-wheel drive. Here it's telling you it's in park. And this is the speed and RPM display. You can set it for several different displays. I like to watch the speed and the RPMs. And you can scroll through and you can see I've got 1,597 kilometers on it, and 15 hours and 56 minutes of operation time. And this is a trip meter, so the last trip I did about 58 kilometers, so I try and reset it. And the total hours on the unit is 73 hours and 27 minutes. So I'll probably end up changing the oil again at, I would say, between 90 and 100 hours. I just changed it last summer and haven't really used the unit that much, but we'll check the oil and make sure that it's the level's still correct and it looks good. So that's pretty much the display on it. I do like the display on it. It's informative enough. Again, I've got the dreaded, I'm going to turn it off here, and when it resets you'll see the dreaded Can-Am maintenance required message, which basically is computer generated based on number of hours or number of miles that you've done on the unit, and it's basically to get you to go into the dealer to do the servicing on it. I do all the servicing myself, so there's no way really to reset that maintenance required message other than going into the dealer and getting them to connect their monitor, and they can reset it from there. So I just use it as a reminder, basically, that I should check the oil before the next time I use it. And also it does have power steering, which is very nice. You saw the DPS message, it said DPS medium. That means I have the power steering set to medium response, so you can set it to low, medium, and high depending on your preference and the conditions that you're riding in. So overall, I would say it's been a pretty good unit. 3 years old, 1,500 kilometers, so it's not seeing a lot of usage, and again, it's not usage that is considered severe, and most of you ATV aficionados would say, there's no mud on that thing, there must be something wrong with you. Well, I think there is something wrong with me. I don't really like getting it too muddy because then I have to clean it, so it's all laziness. In here you can see the front differential, so that's part of the four-wheel drive system there. It's got the adjustable shocks here. It gives you a tool so you can change the pressure on the springs. I haven't done that yet, but I think on the front end I want to raise the pressure just a little bit because it leans pretty hard when you're turning left or right. So if I allow more pressure on the spring and stiffen up the suspension a bit, it shouldn't lean quite as much. And it's got the standard exhaust system on it. Like I said, it's all stock. I haven't done anything to it at all. And then the rear differentials here. I'm not sure what the L designation is for this unit. It could be, I think because it's a lower price model than maybe a Can-Am 650, I think is the next model up. It's not, is it an Outlander? Can't remember the models off the top of my head, but the L designation may mean it's a little bit stripped down because, like I said, I did have to put the winch on, I did have to put the front bumper on, like the unit didn't come with those accessories. And maybe that was just one way to keep the price down. So, but again, overall it's been a really good unit, so we're going to carry on doing some quick maintenance on it. First step will be, I got myself a little siphon gadget here. Just hold on a second. Okay, let's turn that key off. So I've got my siphoning gadget here, which is just basically a bulb that will draw from one direction and pump out the other direction. I'm going to stick the hose into the fuel tank here. And the nice thing about this one is it's got a flexible hose because this tank is kind of offset. You can get the hose right down to where the fuel is. And I've got a trusty gas can here that I'm going to pump the fuel into. So, just make sure I put the right hose in the tank. Okay, that's the suction side. So we're going to put the spill side into the tank. I'll just set that down there so it's lower than the tank. And you can kind of smell, the fuel doesn't smell very fresh for sure. It almost has a varnish smell to it, and I'm hoping that it doesn't have too much of that. We're just going to start pumping here. Going to get it way down in there. I'll probably end up filling up this little jerry can I have here. If I'd been smart, I could have put some fuel stabilizer in it in the fall, and then I wouldn't have to be going through this whole scenario. But just for the sake of protecting the engine, gases that sit around for a long time can end up getting varnishy, and then they'll polish up your valves and basically bugger up the fuel injectors and stuff like that. And you could even have an engine failure. Okay, I pumped and pumped. It took about 7 minutes to pump the tank out with this siphon. And my jerry can has probably got just about a gallon of gas in it. So I think we got out as much gas as we're going to. So the one thing about these units is it does say it has a 5-gallon gas tank in it, but it also has a reserve. Now I'm not sure if the reserve is part of that 5 gallons, and the gauge is reading what's in just the normal part of the tank and the reserve is just a lower part of the tank or what. But I know I've gone on empty and was able to go probably 10 or 15 kilometers and still didn't completely run out of gas. Of course, you know, I was kind of alone on the trail when I was that low, which was stupid of me. But I did make it back to the drop-off area without a problem. So just keep in mind that even though your gas gauge does read empty, there is a bit of a reserve, but safety first, best not to use that reserve. And this is just a simple siphon, again, with the ball and the 2 hoses on it. Nice length of hose. This tank was pretty deep to get at, so I'm just going to set this outside, let it air off. So yeah, that I got 4 to 5 liters or a gallon and a gallon a bit of fuel. So we certainly sucked out as much of it as I think we're going to get for now. It still smells gassy, but it does still smell a little varnishy too, so I'm happy I'm taking it out and not running it through the motor and end up causing internal engine damage by using it. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is just give the oil a quick check. I changed it probably, I'm going to say last summer, and I haven't driven the unit very much since then. And the oil is nice and clean and right up where it's supposed to be. So that's good news. So I'm not going to worry about changing that. Maybe I'll probably change it again in the fall. I don't do a lot of heavy duty quadding. I don't get in the mud a lot and that type of thing. So I would say this thing is probably run in definitely less than harsh conditions. So I'm good on the oil until probably the fall, and then I'll change it out again. Next thing we'll do is just go around and check all the tire pressures. Okay, on this unit the recommended tire pressure is between 6 and 10 pounds depending on how loaded you are. I usually keep them around 7. Again, I'm not hauling anything around like a wagon or anything with it, so the back tires I load up with air the same as the front tires at 7 pounds. So check this front one. And it's showing 5.5 pounds. So we're going to probably put 1.5 pounds in that one, and I assume for sitting so long all of the tires are going to need air as well. So again, I'm going to air them up at 7 pounds. Now, it doesn't take much to get them up to 7 pounds, especially from 5.5. That's 6.5 there. And there we go. 7 pounds, or however if you can read it. So that's that tire. Let's go do the other 3 now. So as part of my start of season regiment, I guess is probably a better way to put it, I like to check the boots on the axles, make sure there's no splits or anything in them. Check the seals on the differentials. And there's the U-joint in there. It's hard to tell in this light how well it looks, but from my perspective it looks okay. I'm going to put my hand in there, see if I can move the drive shaft at all. There's no movement in there, so that's good. And these boots as well. I did have to do the brakes on this thing already. I think I got mud jammed up in them and they seem to have dragged or something, and there's the one rear brake and the two front brakes. I had to change the pads out already. So again, we'll check the boots in here. Feel okay. Connections on the winch are nice and tight. No leaks around the shocks. Those boots feel good as well. And no leaking out of the differential. Get the front end to tug here. Doesn't seem to be any play in the front end anywhere, which is good to see. And there are quite a few grease points on these units that you should do probably every 500 to 1,000 hours. And I'm due to do that too, so you just got to find all of the different grease points and grease them up and keep everything nice and lubricated. And the shocks look good, there's no leaking in them. The other thing is to check the radiator for any blockages. Overall, that radiator looks pretty clean. And you can, the only way I can test the fan myself is to have it running and make sure it kicks in and out. That's another thing on this unit. The fan is really noisy on it, and I think the bearing is already starting to go in it. So at some point I'm going to have to replace that fan. Okay, the next thing we should check is the battery, which is underneath the seat. And there's this lever in the back. Pull up the seat, and there's your battery. And I usually just check to make sure the contacts are nice and clean and the connections are tight. And that one's tight. This positive looks like it used just a little bit of a tighten with a screwdriver, just a Phillips head. Got my Phillips head screwdriver. Just get it in there, give that a bit of a tighten. And that connection's good and tight. May as well check the ground as well. And it's good as well. So I don't see any signs of corrosion or anything. This battery's about 3 years old, so well, getting even close to 4 years old. But the unit still seems to start up just fine using it. And right here is your brake fluid, which you should give a check too, just to make sure. You can also check the brake fluid on a sight glass. Actually, this one doesn't have a sight glass. Well, there it is. There is a sight glass right there, you can see. And you can see that there is fluid up in there. At least I can. So there's fluid right up all the way through that window there. And then this is just the reservoir for it down here. If you need to add fluid, make sure you add the specific fluid that is recommended on it. This one says a .4, so make sure you're filling it up with the correct fluid type. And to actually check the fluid in this reservoir, you have to take out these two Phillips screws. They're pretty long. And lift the lid off, and then you can see that your fluid is good and full here. Sure you tighten your screws back down. Okay, the other thing you're going to want to do is check your air filter, which is down in here, in behind this canister. So you got to remove this panel up here, which is pretty straightforward. You just pull up on these rubber grommets and slide that plastic piece out, and there's the air filter sitting there. So it does have a bolt head on there. Sometimes you can spin it off with your hand like that, just counterclockwise. And pull it out and give that a quick look. Now in my mind that looks pretty darn good. It's got this foam cover on it, and then it does have a cartridge underneath it. overall that filter looks nice and clean, and the cartridge that's within looks nice and clean as well. So I'm not going to worry too much about that right now. It's not plugged up at all. It's also a good idea to put a little lube on that end as well so that it fits within the housing nice and snug. This one's got some grease on it already, so I'm just going to leave it as is. Make sure it's nice and snug in there, and then put the cover back on. Nice and tight and clean, and put this cover back in. It just fits, kind of molded at the top to fit in, and then there's these rubber grommets that just the cover slips in. And last but not least, let's put the seat back on. The seat just slips underneath the front housing here, and then there's two rubber posts back here that it fits into after that. And there we go, nice and snug. So that's some general checks you can do on your ATV. Mine just happens to be a Can-Am. And in this instance, we just did general checks on it. The next time we do something with this quad, I'm going to take off the cover here and check on the belt. Like I said, it's got 1,500 kilometers on it and 75 hours. So I've never had any problems with the belt so far. I have checked it once and it looked just fine. But I think I'll end up buying one just to carry as a spare, and the tools needed to change it out. And we'll do that in another video. The last step will be to get some gas in it and fire it up, make sure it's running okay. Let's put a couple gallons of fresh fuel in there. I'm not going to fill it right up because I'm not going to be using it right away, but let's just get some in there anyways. Okay, that should be enough to get it started anyways. Let's see what the gauge says. The gauge is showing about a quarter, so probably just about the same amount of fuel we had in it before we started. So let's fire this sucker up, see how she sounds. So park. Start her up. See how nice this power steering is. Hardly takes any strength to turn the wheels. Brakes seem to work okay. Storage cover. I wouldn't be keeping your passport or anything in here, but it's good for storing your manual and your registration. And I have a tree saver to help yank me out of the bush if I need it, and then the remote to my rope winch. And what else is in here? That's a drain plug for the, I think it's the bottom of the belt housing. Well, that's it for this edition of Mundane Man, as I just took you through the maintenance checks of your ATV before you go out on the trails. And this stuff applies to most ATVs. Mine just happens to be a Can-Am, and so some of the different components might be a little bit different, but in general you should always make sure your unit is maintained before you go out on the trails so you don't end up stranding yourself. So if you found this video helpful, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, maybe share it with your friends, and that is it. We will catch you on the next version of Mundane Man. See you soon. Bye-bye.